The ship drifted in Earth's shadow, cloaked from all known sensors, its black surface drinking in the light of the sun. It did not hum, it did not blink. It simply hovered above the blue planet like a silent eye, observing. Inside that ship, behind layers of organic metal and light-filtered crystal, stood 3 members of the Threx Dominion, an ancient alien race known across the stars not for war, but for knowledge. The Threx had seen many worlds burn. They had recorded civil wars, planetary collapses, and species that ate themselves into extinction. But Earth was different. Earth had frightened whispers around it. It's not because of its weapons or its technology, or even its history, but because of what happened when humans went to war. And now, for the first time, the Threx had come to see it for themselves. Let observer Selvax pressed 2 long fingers against the glass interface and zoomed in on the surface of the Earth. Targeting the human conflict zone currently active. On the Western continent, it was not a world war. Not yet. But it was violent and brutal. Nations fighting over dwindling land, cities reduced to shadows. Civilians caught between collapsing governments and roving private armies. Yet amidst the chaos, one thing was clear: the humans were not falling apart. They were adapting. They have split into factions, Selvax said calmly, his voice low and dry like old leaves, not unexpected. Watcher Amari tilted her head, adjusting the focus. But look, they've built forward bases, reinforced supply lines. There's tactical control here. This is not random slaughter. It's not random at all, added the third Threx, younger analyst named Corin. His eyes shimmered with flickering data as he watched a feed of human soldiers, coordinating airdrops and evacuations while under fire. They're losing people, but not ground. They're calculating every move. For a few minutes, no one spoke. They simply watched. On one screen, a human soldier with a broken leg dragged 2 children behind a ruined tank while firing a rifle one-handed. On another, a team of medics stabilized a wounded pilot under mortar, fire barely flinching as explosions shook the dirt around them. In the skies, drones moved like vultures with purpose, targeting enemy armor with deadly precision, each strike timed between friendly unit movement. No wasted fire, no panic. Selvax narrowed his eyes. They are cold. No, Imari. Corrected, they are burning. But they've learned to carry the fire inside. The Threx had expected screams, desperation, uncoordinated savagery. Instead, they saw structure, strategy, rage, yes but, filtered through something far more terrifying: discipline. The humans weren't just fighting, they were working the battlefield. They used every inch of terrain, every second of time, every resource, like they had been born for this. They fight like they've already died before, Corin whispered. Like they're not afraid to do it again. Hours passed. Threx observers watched hundreds of skirmishes, dozens of operations, and still, the pattern never broke. Human squads retreated only to reposition for ambush. Drones were downed, only to be salvaged and turned into traps. Even their silence was a tool at night. The battlefield became quiet, but not because they rested. They moved in the dark like shadows with rifles. No one in the Threx Dominion had ever seen such behavior. From a so-called young species, Selvax accessed old Dominion war records, comparing tactics. They fight unlike the Corin. The Corin rushed in waves, or the Velneri, who rely on overwhelming firepower. The humans conserve their ammo. They plan. They even sacrifice one unit to protect another, as if thinking 4 moves ahead. Corin nodded slowly. They are a war species. Or a species that survived war for too long, Imari said. At one point, the observers witnessed a brutal engagement. A human squad caught in crossfire between 2 enemy positions. Instead of retreating, the human commander ordered a flanking. Unit 2, charge not for victory, but to draw enemy fire long enough for a medical team to evacuate a civilian group from a collapsed building. The flanking unit didn't survive, but neither did the enemy. They died. Not for gain, Corin muttered, but for meaning. That is what frightens me, Selvax said. They don't seek conquest. They don't seek glory. They seek survival with purpose. They will burn every enemy and themselves, if that's what it takes to protect what matters. And then it happened. The moment that changed everything. In a nighttime operation under heavy rain, human commandos stormed a facility believed to house war criminals. The Threx watched the feed closely. It was a bloodbath, fast, efficient, surgical. No noise, no broadcasted demands, just entry, clearance, and extraction. The soldiers carried infrared cloaks, used their own heartbeat sensors, and never once raised their voices. When it was over, the facility was cleared in under 6 minutes. Inside, they found and freed 22 prisoners, many of them children. The final footage that broke the silence aboard the alien ship was simple. One human soldier, helmet off, sat down on a muddy floor and handed a crying child a chocolate. Bar pulled from his vest. The rain poured down. The soldier's arm was bleeding, but he smiled. No words. Just a nod. Selvax turned away from the screen. Korin swallowed hard. Imari whispered, "They fight like monsters, but protect like gods." Later that night, in the quiet of the command chamber, Selvax reviewed all the footage. The screens glowed around him like ghosts of memory. War, fire, pain, compassion. Humanity wasn't just dangerous, they were awakened. Their wars weren't just fought with weapons, or fought with history, with loss. Fire so deep it had learned to walk calmly, quietly, through horror. That was what the Threx had never seen before. They don't run from the nightmare, Selvax whispered. They become it when they must. He tapped the record button. "Begin report to the Dominion High Assembly," he said, voice slow. "Subject, human combat analysis. Classification. Tier 1 threat. Summary. The humans are not to be provoked. Not because of their strength, not because of their machines, but because of the cold fire in their hearts when they fight. Oh, they do not intend to survive. They intend to win. And they make no distinction between the two." He paused, then added quietly, "If they ever bring this fire to the stars, we will all lose sleep forever." Outside, Earth kept spinning, unaware that its darkest hours had just become someone else's greatest fear. The Threx ship floated above Earth's atmosphere like a quiet shadow, hidden from all detection, yet fully awake. Inside its observation dome, the mood had shifted. What began as a simple survey had become something deeper, darker. The Threx had watched many war zones in their thousands of years, but none like this. None so cold, so intelligent, and so quietly terrifying. The humans didn't just survive Worth, they understood it. They didn't run from its fire. They walked inside it like it belonged to them. Lead observer Selvax stood before the main observation screen as it replayed an earlier engagement in infrared. Human soldiers moved through a ruined industrial zone, enemy gunfire echoing off. Broken steel, but the humans didn't panic. They moved in tight formations, pausing at exact intervals, never wasting a bullet. They left no wounded behind. When one was hit, another took their position instantly. No shouting, no fear, just silence, action, and precision. "These are not rage-driven creatures," Selvax said. "Their faces are calm, their breathing steady. This is not emotion, it is calculation." Imari stood beside him, cross-referencing audio logs. Her voices on the comms are flat. No panic, just short commands. Code words. They fight like one mind. "I don't understand it," said Korin, still younger than the others. "Where is the madness? Where is the screaming? The chaos? They've burned it out of themselves," Imri replied. "Or worse, they've turned it into fuel." On another feed, a drone recorded a small unit trapped in a building under constant artillery shelling. The building shook. Walls collapsed, yet the humans moved floor to floor, reinforcing weak spots with furniture, dragging the injured to cover. Even setting traps for any enemy advance. They used broken glass to reflect sniper fire, shattered mirror to communicate between rooms. One soldier, his arm missing, continued relaying target positions with his free hand. Not one screamed. Not one begged. Selvax watched quietly. They do not surrender to the moment. They master it. As the sun rose over the earth, The Threx ship adjusted position, scanning new battlefronts. In a northern mountain range, human scouts navigated terrain laced with mines and hidden sentries. They moved with terrifying awareness, using even the wind and birds to mask their movement. One soldier used the reflection of falling snow on a glass lens to detect enemy presence. Another made calculations in his head for blast radius, wind resistance, and elevation, then used a handmade slingshot to launch a grenade. Through a broken window, or 200 meters away, it landed precisely. The explosion took out the command center. No noise. No celebration. The team simply vanished into the trees. Corin leaned back, stunned. They calculate like machines. No, Selvak said. Machines follow logic. Humans blend it with instinct. They learn with every second. They fail. Then improve immediately. That's the part I do not understand. That is the part that makes them dangerous. Imari pulled up a biometric reading of a captured human soldier under interrogation by an enemy force. Look at his vitals. He's in pain. His ribs are broken. But he's laughing. They watched as the human, bruised and bleeding, made jokes to his captors. He misled them, fed them false info. Lead so convincingly it bought his team enough. Time to locate and extract him. The extraction was brutal loud, direct, fast. 3 hostiles neutralized in under 8 seconds. The team pulled the soldier out, patched his wounds midair, continued toward their next target. They hide pain, Corin said, voice low. They weaponize suffering. Selvax nodded slowly. They adapt pain into process. Every trauma becomes a lesson. Every lesson becomes a weapon. Hours later, the Threx began a psychological breakdown of recorded human behavior. They categorized battlefield actions, communication habits, even the use of symbols. What they found unsettled them further. Humans tattooed symbols of fallen comrades on their skin. They named battlefields. They spoke of ancient warriors and long-dead cities like ghosts beside them. They fought with the weight of history behind their eyes. They do not fight alone, Imari whispered. They bring their dead with them. Selvax remained silent. His thoughts were heavier now. Earth was not just another primitive world tearing itself apart. It was something else entirely. Something old and sharpened by time. The humans weren't slaves to war. They had tamed it. Bent it to their culture, their rituals, their systems of honor and survival. War is not their curse, he said finally. It is their craft. The final moment that sealed the Threx's fear came just before Earth's dusk. A massive battle unfolded between 2 elite human factions in a cratered valley. The Threx deployed a hidden observer drone to watch up close. From above, it looked like chaos. But when they slowed the footage and tracked movements frame by frame, they saw it the pattern. Human squads moved like chess pieces. One force used fake retreats to funnel their enemy into a low-ground kill zone. Another force predicted the tactic and countered with a bluff of their own, sending decoys to mimic wounded movement. The real team looped around and took out enemy logistics. From space, it looked like madness. But from within the war it was a symphony. The battlefield is not a storm for them, Selvax said. It is a map they draw as they walk it. Corin's face was pale. How many others have they fought like this? Too many, Imari whispered, and survived all of them. As Earth's night returned and the stars blinked overhead, the Threx closed their final report for the day. They didn't speak much. What they had seen would echo in their minds forever. Humans were not beasts, not wild creatures of emotion. They were something colder, more precise. Their rage was a tool, their fear was armor, and their pain. It was currency they spent freely in the name of survival. Selvax stood alone in the observation dome, watching the blue planet rotate slowly below them. He no longer saw it as primitive or savage or naive. He saw it now as a forge, a place, where something terrible had been shaped over millennia, something that smiled in the dark and calculated how to win. The Threx did not make decisions quickly. Their kind believed in observation, caution, and distance. But after what they had seen on Earth, after watching humans fight, sacrifice, and adapt with terrifying precision questions remained unanswered. Watching from orbit was no longer enough. They needed to feel the war, smell the smoke, stand among the chaos, and understand what it was that made humans so calm inside the storm. That was when Corin volunteered, youngest among the observers. Corin was bold, hungry for understanding. He requested a bioadaptive field suit, a rare Threx technology that allowed full-body cloaking, molecular disguise, and temporary atmospheric shielding. With it, he could walk among the humans undetected. The others hesitated. But Selvax, after a long silence, gave a nod. "If we are to fear them," he said, "then let us first know them." Corin's descent capsule launched silently. It pierced the Earth's upper atmosphere, cloaked and invisible, before gliding low into the dark horizon of a war-torn human city. Craters pitted the streets like open wounds. Smoke drifted from broken buildings. Fires burned, not wildly, but in strange patterns, marking safe zones or warning signs, depending on who had lit them. The smell of gunpowder, melted metal, and ash filled the air. But the humans were still there, still fighting, still moving with quiet purpose. Corin crept through the ruins of a shattered district. His suit bent the light around him, making him vanish to human eyes. Saw a child huddled in a corner beside a wounded woman, her mother, likely. A human soldier knelt beside them, placing a ration bar in the child's hand and checking the woman's pulse. Her legs were gone, yet the soldier showed no fear. He simply adjusted his gear, opened his comm, and called for an evac drone. Minutes later, it came. Fast, silent, efficient. The drone dropped out of the sky, stabilized itself on 4 legs, lifted the mother into a stretcher pod, and took off without a sound. The child followed, holding the soldier's hand. Corin blinked slowly. "So much loss," he whispered, but no collapse. He moved deeper into the city. There, inside the remains of an old school, he saw what he could not believe. A human unit had made a base of operations among the ruins. They were operating generators, triage tables, cooking stations. Soldiers laughed while loading ammunition. Medics joked as they cleaned wounds. One young woman sang softly while sewing up a torn uniform. The sound was haunting, beautiful. "In the middle of war," they sang. Corin's heart tightened. They were not just enduring war, they were living through it. Suddenly an explosion rocked the building. Enemy artillery. The humans didn't scream. They moved instantly, each one knowing their task. The medics grabbed the wounded. Engineers ran to protect the generator. The soldiers lined up at key points, ready to return fire. No chaos, only action, controlled, fast, sharp. Then Corin saw something that chilled him. A commander walked toward a soldier who had just been shot in the leg. The soldier gritted his teeth, but said nothing. The commander glanced at the wound, pulled a combat knife from his belt, and cut the soldier's pants away with steady hands. He applied a temporary field dressing, helped the man to his feet, and sent him to the rear line. "You've still got one good leg," he said with a grin. "Use it." The soldier nodded, limped away, no begging, no drama, just duty. Corin felt himself breathing harder, even though his suit adjusted oxygen for him. These were not war beasts. They were not screaming predators. They were something colder, smarter. Their strength wasn't in their firepower, it was in their mindset. Unity. It was something not even the Threx had mastered. They were survivors by choice. Night fell. The battle calmed. Corin stayed hidden, crouched between the cracks of a ruined stairwell. The humans had returned to a quiet rhythm. Someone played a harmonica near the fire. Another shared coffee made from burnt powder. Soldiers leaned against broken walls and stared at the stars. One of them pulled out a small picture of his family and passed it. Around they didn't cry. They remembered. Corin noticed how many of them looked upward, toward space, toward the place where he and his people watched silently. He wondered if they knew. Could they feel the Threx gaze on them? Or was it something else, a habit born of hope? Then a voice spoke. It was the commander again, now sitting near the fire, talking to the younger soldiers. "You all think this war is about lines on a map," he said. "But it's not. It's about proving that we don't break. That no matter how hard they hit us, we hit back. We don't just win battles, we outlive them. That's how we've made it this far. That's how we'll keep going." The soldiers nodded quietly. One of them asked, "Even if we lose?" The commander's eyes narrowed. He pointed to the ground. "This isn't loss. This is what building victory looks like." Corin turned to leave. He had seen enough, but just as he activated his return beacon, something unexpected happened. A child barefoot, covered in soot, walked toward him. The cloaking should have hidden him. The child shouldn't have seen anything, but she looked directly at him. Corin froze. The girl tilted her head. Then she smiled. "You're not one of us. But you're watching, right?" He said nothing. She pointed to the camp behind her. "We don't break, just remember that." Then she turned and walked away. Corin stood there, stunned, his heart pounding. The child had seen through the technology. Or maybe humans didn't need eyes to sense fear. Maybe they just felt it. Back aboard the HFY ship. Hours later, Corin returned in silence. His report was brief. "They are not driven by chaos," he said. "They are held together by something we do not understand. Not fear, not obedience. Something more, something ancient." Selvaks listened carefully, then asked, "Are they conquerors?" Corin shook his head. "No," he said. "But if you push them, they will become something worse. They will become necessary. No force in the galaxy can stop something that believes it has no choice." The HFY ship drifted back into high orbit, but now none of them slept. They had walked through the fire and left with the fear still burning in their minds. The stars watched in silence as the HFY ship circled Earth again. Days had passed since Corin walked among the humans, since he came back shaken and quiet. But the questions didn't end. If anything, they multiplied. The HFYs had always believed that the greatest threat in war was power weapons, fleets, numbers. But now, after everything they had witnessed, something else disturbed them more deeply. Human intent. Their will. Their control over fear, pain, and chaos. But the next discovery made even that seem small, because now the HFYs began to see the machines, and the machines obeyed the humans like extensions of their thoughts. At first, Selvaks assumed the humans' combat drones were basic, remote-controlled, devices useful for scouting or cover fire. But the more they watched, the less it made sense. These machines didn't just follow commands, they anticipated them. In one engagement, 2 drones carried a wounded man across open ground under fire, calculating the safest path and even deploying smoke cover as they moved. No human guided them directly, yet they moved like trained medics. "They are not drones," Imari whispered, watching the footage. "They are soldiers." Corin pulled up a deeper scan of the field systems. "Linked," he said. "They're neural linked, not autonomous, not fully AI. The humans feed them decisions." Directly, Selvaks narrowed his eyes. "How?" The answer came in the next observation. A human unit was preparing for a deep infiltration into enemy territory. The soldiers sat in a cold bunker, their eyes closed, hands resting on smooth crystal interfaces. Across the room, a dozen war machines powered up bipedal walkers, scout drones, and hovering gunships. As the humans focused, the machines began to move in perfect harmony, as if puppets and masters were joined by invisible strings. But there were no strings, only mind-links. Corin gasped. "They are guiding them. With thought." But it was not the technology that frightened the HFYs. It was the precision. The humans didn't flinch. They didn't show strain. One soldier controlled a gunship's targeting systems while maintaining full awareness of the field. Another operated a walking mech that protected children during an evacuation using only his mind. The machine crouched, covered fire, then carried the children to safety with care. It moved like a human would move, This is not control, Imari whispered. This is bonding. As hours passed, the Threx began to realize the truth. The humans had never sought to replace themselves with machines. They had sought to amplify themselves, where other species built AI to do their fighting, Earth built tools to fight alongside. Them machines were not masters, not slaves. They were extensions of humanity's will, crafted with human fear, sharpened by human rage, guided by human compassion, and the result was terrifying. On another screen, the Threx watched a large-scale assault. Human forces advanced into enemy-held ruins. Enemy walkers opened fire. It should have been a massacre, but it wasn't, because the machines came. They moved like wolves' drones flying between buildings, marking targets, weaving between soldiers like they were reading thoughts. Walker units used debris to create cover. Microbots rebuilt fallen barricades mid-battle. A drone shielded a soldier from a blast with its own body. Then, from above, a human airship dropped a swarm of repair. Drones small, fast, silent. They hit the ground and immediately reassembled a broken vehicle. In less than 90 seconds, it was rolling again. Selvax could barely speak. "This is not war," he said. "It's orchestration." But the moment that shook the Threx crew came at the battle's peak. An enemy mech larger, more advanced, peered and began to tear through the front line. Crushed vehicles broke through cover and fired plasma into the ranks. Panic started. Even the machines couldn't stop it. Then, one human stepped forward, a single woman. She pulled off her helmet, revealing the neurogear beneath a silver band across her scalp with pulsing blue nodes. Her eyes glowed faintly. Her breathing slowed. She dropped her rifle, and then Earth moved. All at once, 5 combat walkers stood and turned toward the mech. Her mind flowed into them, not as commands, but as feeling. They moved like her muscles.
Yes.
They flanked, evaded, struck in unison.
Abs.
One walked straight into enemy fire to open a path. Another launched a harpoon that pinned the enemy mech's left arm. She guided the final 2 in a coordinated strike gripping. The core from the beast's chest in a shower of sparks. Silence followed. She stood in the dust.
Ash.
Blood on her face, shaking, not from fear, from effort. Because controlling that many machines at once had nearly burned her alive, but she had won. Back on the Threx ship, no one spoke. They just watched the playback again, and again, and again. Not because they didn't understand, but because they did. The machines were not the danger. The danger was what kind of mind the humans had to build such things. To link with cold steel, not lose themselves, and still make moral decisions. They had fused war with instinct, compassion with tactics, and created something inhuman, yet still completely human. Imari leaned back, her face pale. If they ever build larger fleets, starships guided by human minds. Corin finished the thought, no one will survive. That night, Stelvac sent a private message to the Dominion High Assembly. His words were brief. The humans are not controlled by their machines, nor do they fear them. They fight with their machines like fingers of the same hand. It is not domination. It is cooperation fueled by desperation. And if they ever point that cooperation toward the stars, we will not be ready. In Earth's ruins below, the woman who had controlled the walkers sat alone in the dust. She looked at her. Hands one trembled. She closed it, then smiled, because she knew the enemy had seen what she could do, and she hoped they would remember it. The Threx ship floated high above Earth, cloaked in shadow, unseen. But inside, everything was changing. Fear had already taken root. What had started as an academic mission had become something else, a warning unspoken. They'd watched the humans fight. They had watched them sacrifice. They'd watched them fuse with machines and treat war not as madness but as science. Selvax and his team needed answers to a new question. What do the humans say when no one is watching? Corin initiated the intercept systems. Human communications were primitive by Threx standards digital packets. Simple encryption, wideband transmissions, but there was something strange about them, something subtle, and not what the humans said, but how they said it. Pull transmissions. From the Eastern Front, Selvax ordered, "Focus on active combat units." At once, dozens of audio logs appeared. The voices of human soldiers filled the dome, crackling calm, clipped with purpose. Echo 3. Move 50 meters north. Confirm overwatch. Roger that. Fire Team Lima said. Quiet entry. Out. No lights. Target marked. No deviation. 5. There was no panic. No chaos. Even under fire, their voices were cold, calculated. They spoke as if death was background noise. And then, to the Threx's shock, they laughed. "Command, I think they missed." "Good. Saves us the cleanup." They brought tanks to a knife fight. Classic. Imari frowned. "They make jokes during combat." Corin nodded, consistently, especially when outnumbered. Selvax leaned forward, his voice low. "They speak in code, but their humor is real. It relieves stress, strengthens the group." "They do not fear death," Imari said. "No," Selvax replied. "They fear failure. Death is just a cost." As more transmissions came in, the Threx started mapping human unit behaviors to their voice patterns. They discovered something terrifying. Human commanders could issue 10-word commands and entire squads would execute complex maneuvers instantly. Their code words weren't just language, they were training tattoos burned into the brain. Example, Black Rain. The words meant nothing to outsiders. But the moment the order was given, the entire urban team shifted into an extraction drill, clearing buildings, dragging wounded, and laying suppressive fire in perfect harmony. Another phrase, Dust Heart. One voice spoke it. Seconds later, every sniper along a ridgeline fired at the exact same time. The Threx checked the math. 8 shots in the same second. 8 kills. "Impossible," Corin whispered. "No," Selvax corrected. "Human." Wasn't just what was said, it was what wasn't said. Silence, long gaps of pure quiet over open comes. Even in the middle of battle, the Threx listened in disbelief as one team moved through a collapsed city block. No talking, no noise, then a single whispered word, "Feather." And the enemy never saw them coming. They communicate without communicating, Imari said. They read each other's movements, expect each other's actions. Like instinct, Corin added. Like pack animals. Selvax didn't respond. He was watching another feed, this one from a captured satellite above a combat zone. Human forces had surrounded an enemy artillery base. They were outnumbered, outgunned. But the humans didn't attack directly. Instead, they fell back, disappeared into the night. The Threx thought they had retreated, but they were wrong, because hours later, static began crawling across human comms. Intentional. Distortion, white noise, encrypted pulses. At first, the Threx couldn't understand. But then, realization hit. They're hijacking enemy channels, Corin said in awe. And they were. The humans began broadcasting false orders to enemy units, disguising their voices, mimicking commands, rerouting drones into ambushes. The enemy thought they were regrouping, but in truth, they were walking straight into traps, all from invisible human voices. The artillery base fell within 20 minutes. The last enemy unit surrendered. Thinking they'd been betrayed by their own side, they hadn't. They had simply been outplayed. Selvax sat in silence. His hands trembled slightly in emotion. The Threx rarely displayed. "This is not communication," he whispered. "This is weaponized language. Every word is part of a larger pattern. Every silence is a tactic. They build trust through code," Imari said. "They strengthen morale with laughter. They break enemies with misdirection. Their words are as deadly as their weapons." But it was more than that. The Threx realized the battlefield wasn't just land, air and fire. It was mind. And the humans had mastered it. Then came the final. Audio log. The Threx had intercepted a field recording taken from a helmet cam during a failed assault. A small team was trapped behind enemy lines. One wounded, no ammo. The extraction window had closed, but they didn't panic. They spoke quietly, even laughed. One voice female. Steady said, "Looks like we're gonna miss lunch." A male voice replied, "Guess we'll just have to make them miss dinner." And they prepared to die, but not alone. They set explosives, jammed enemy sensors, and in their final moment, activated a beacon that pulled an orbital drone strike right onto their position, vaporizing both themselves and the enemy around them. Not a single scream, not a single second of hesitation. Just one last voice, calm as ice. For Earth. Back aboard the Threx ship, Imari shut off the audio. No one spoke. Selvax finally stood and faced the stars. They use language like steel. Their silence is armor. Their laughter is a weapon. And when they speak, it is never wasted. Corin turned toward him. "What do we do?" Selvax gave no answer. Because there was none. Not anymore. Out there. Beneath the clouds, Earth still turned. And somewhere, more soldiers were speaking in code. More voices cracking jokes between death. More silence being carved into the sky like warnings no one else could hear. The Threx now knew the truth. War was not their invention, but humanity had turned it into art. There had always been a Lenan invisible one. The Threx knew it. So did the other species who watched humanity from a distance. The line between survival and destruction, between patience and retaliation. And the Threx believed, perhaps foolishly, that humans had not crossed that line yet. That they were still testing, still learning, still bleeding quietly in the ruins of their cities. But all lines eventually break. And when they do, something ancient awakens. Something the Threx would never forget. They called it the Reckoning. Field it began with a silence deafening and wide. The Threx were tracking a human military outpost located near a broken desert, where the land was so dry it cracked like bone. It had been attacked. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly, by enemy species trying to prove they could break Earth's spirit. Every time the humans pushed them back, barely, with scraped machines and torn armor. But the last attack had gone. Too far, the enemy hadn't just attacked, they had executed. Civilians, children, doctors, unarmed medics trying to drag the wounded to safety. And this time, humanity didn't retreat. They called the signal Black Sun. The code meant nothing to the Threx at first, but it soon meant everything. The human counter-response didn't come with horns or thunder. It came with quiet. No threats, no broadcasts. No speeches, just movements. A week after the massacre, the desert shook. Satellites picked up energy signatures that hadn't been used in centuries. Massive dropships launched from orbit. World war machines rose from bunkers buried so deep. Even Earth's own military had forgotten them. Ancient carriers rusted but operational lifted from oceans. Dripping salt water, cannons turning skyward. They were not new, but they were alive. And the Rex saw what no one else did. This wasn't a reaction. It was a ritual. Selvax and his crew watched from orbit as the reckoning field unfolded. An enemy army, confident and well-armed, stood in the broken desert waiting for another easy fight. What they got was silence, then dust, then the ground split open. From the canyons and cracks rose human war machines unlike any seen before. Massive walkers with rotating missile batteries, rolling tanks the size of buildings, and heavy artillery platforms dragged by chains, reinforced with neutron steel. Behind them, soldiers walked in rows, not fast, not urgent, but steady. Their eyes burned with quiet fire. Their helmets were painted with names, names of the dead. And when the wind blew, those names whispered through the wreckage. The first barrage was nothing short of mythical. Humans didn't aim to scare. They aimed to end. Within 45 seconds, over 200 enemy vehicles were destroyed. Communications jammed, supply routes erased from the map. The sand turned to molten glass as directed energy weapons sliced through defensive walls. The enemy command posts never got a distress call out. They were gone before they even understood. The war had begun. Corin, watching from the sensor station, could barely breathe. They gave no warning, he whispered. No, Selvax replied. They gave justice. But the most terrifying moment wasn't the attack. It was what happened after. The humans didn't celebrate. They didn't broadcast. Victory, they didn't even speak. Instead, they built a field of flags. Where each civilian had died, they placed a steel marker, etched with name, date, and time. Round those flags, they stood guard for ours. Silent, some knelt, some saluted. Then one soldier wept, then wiped her face, stood tall, and marched back to her unit. The Threx had seen many species destroy, but this was different. This was vengeance fused with memory, and it didn't fade. Later that night, Human General sent a short message to the stars. It was not broadcast on open frequencies. It was targeted. Straight at the Threx, we held the line. The general said, "We did not ask for this war. But now that you've all watched in silence, remember this day, because we will. Remember everything." The message was signed, Humanity, Earthborn, bound by blood, forged by fire. The Threx ship trembled. Not from impact, but from what the crew now understood. The humans had let the galaxy watch. They knew they were observed, studied, judged, and they had said nothing until... Now this was not the outburst of a desperate species. It was the final lesson of a patient one in the days that followed. Enemy fleets pulled back from Earth's outer systems. Smugglers spread tales of firestorms, of machines that spoke in human, voices in cities that rebuilt themselves overnight. Alien diplomats asked questions, offered peace, sent warnings of rogue factions acting alone, but humanity did not respond. They didn't need to. The reckoning. Ild spoke for them. Imari sat in the Threx observatory chamber, hands clenched tight. "What are they becoming?" she asked quietly. Selvax gave the only answer he could. "They are not becoming anything," he said. "This is who they have always been. We just didn't see it, and now..." Selvax turned to the stars. "Now we do." On Earth, the soldiers packed their gear. The machines went back into the bunkers. The flags remained, each one shining. Beneath the sun, each one a warning. We did not start this, but we will finish it. In the weeks after the Reckoning Field, the galaxy held its breath. The enemy fleets that once hovered near Earth's edge vanished like dust on the wind. No new attacks came, no messages, no alliances, only silence. The same kind of silence that made soldiers look over their shoulder, that made captains double-check their scanners, and made entire governments wonder if they had just stared into the eyes of something they were never meant to provoke. Because Earth had gone quiet, too quiet, and that frightened everyone more than any war ever had. The Threx continued their orbit, in high shadow, still cloaked, still watching. But now they were not observers. They were witnesses. Corin sat in the data chamber, reviewing the planet's surface logs. Across continents, Earth cities were rebuilding, not slowly, not frantically, but with eerie purpose. Machines moved like ants, repairing infrastructure, sealing damaged roads, and reconnecting communication towers. Civilians walked calmly among ruins that were already half-healed. Children played near blast craters. Stores reopened. Classes resumed underground. There were no parades, no cheers. No signs of victory. Just order, discipline, a kind. A unity that no alien world had ever shown after a war. Imari leaned forward over her console. "I don't understand," she said. "They lost millions. They suffered more than any other species. Would tolerate, yet they show no trauma, no rage." "They do," Corin replied softly. "But it's internal, controlled." Selvax joined them, silent for a long time. Then he spoke. "They haven't gone silent because they are afraid," he said. "They've gone silent because they are focused." Elsewhere in the galaxy, rumors grew like storms. Merchant vessels whispered about ghost fleets, human warships appearing and vanishing along distant trade routes. Pirate clans reported AI warnings in human voices that told them to turn around, Before it was too late, rogue factions began disappearing. No trace, no wreckage. It's just empty space where once there had been activity. Some thought Earth had sent assassins. Others believed they had released something worse, but no one could confirm it, because Earth never admitted anything, never responded, never made threats. They simply waited and watched. The silence became a weapon. Alien. Leaders panicked. They sent drones to Earth's atmosphere, trying to gauge the situation. All were destroyed, not with missiles, not with lasers. With precision, the drones simply blinked off the radar, removed by systems that left no trace. One message was received before blackout: "You've already seen enough." That was it. 3 words. But those words shook entire governments, because it meant Earth knew. Knew they were still being watched. Knew they were feared. And didn't care. Back aboard the Threx ship, Selvax called for a full council. They played. Hours of surveillance footage on the main screen. Human cities being rebuilt. Drones patrolling borders. Old satellites blinking back to life. Factories producing not weapons but tools. Agriculture, infrastructure, engineering, they are not. Preparing for another war, Imari said. No, Selvax replied. They are preparing for something else. But what? Corin asked. Selvax didn't answer at first. He just stared at Earth, turning in the dark. Clouds drifting slowly over oceans and land. Then he said it. They are preparing to lead. And that was the new fear. Not that humans would fight again, but that they wouldn't have to. Because soon, others might follow them willingly. Already, smaller fringe species, once ignored by the great councils, were contacting human diplomats. Secret talks. Quiet pacts. They admired Earth's resolve, their loyalty to civilians, their refusal to abandon their wounded, their ability to stand alone and win. And if Earth began to gather allies, the balance of the galaxy would collapse. Imari scanned deep space comms. There's a signal, she said, coming from a colony system, once controlled by the Dominion. Let me guess, Selvax said. What? It's not Dominion controlled. Any more? Imari nodded. The signal was simple. A video clip of a human medical ship landing in a burned-out city. The soldiers unloading food, supplies. Clean water. The message attached was just one sentence. They came when no one else did. That was when Selvax knew the truth. Earth didn't need to conquer. They just needed to be remembered. Remembered for standing alone. Remembered for fighting with purpose. Remembered for keeping quiet when others would brag. Their silence wasn't absence, it was echo, and now that echo was spreading. Corin stood on the observatory deck that night. Looking down at the blue planet, he thought about the cities, the faces, the flags, the soldiers who didn't boast. The children who looked to the stars, not with fear, but with hope. They had every reason to scream, every reason to burn the galaxy to ash. But instead, they rebuilt. That was their strength. That was what no one else understood. Humanity's greatest. The weapon was not their firepower, it was their restraint. And so the galaxy watched, waited, fearing the quiet more than they had ever feared the noise, because now they knew. When Earth goes silent, the stars should worry. It began with a message, single, trembling signal sent from the central Dominion seat of power. It was routed through 7 neutral channels, encoded in ceremonial phrasing, and delayed by nearly 3 days. It's not because the message was hard to send, but because it was hard to admit. After months of silence, destruction, and fear, the galaxy finally spoke to Earth. We propose peace. Let us sit as equals. Let the wounds heal. The message reached Earth's high orbit, where a dozen quiet satellites blinked and relayed it downward. The signal passed through human hands commanders, diplomats, generals, but no one replied. Not yet. Because Earth remembered, and Earth was not ready to forget. In the great meeting halls of the Threx, debates burned like wildfires. The humans had not attacked since the Reckoning Field. They had not issued demands. They had not built empires. But somehow, their silence had become command. Small colonies followed them, no species once ignored and scattered. They sought shelter not under Dominion law, but under Earth's silence. Because it was in that silence they found dignity, protection, even justice. Cell A. Vax stood in the center of the hall and spoke softly. Peace was offered now, he said. But where was it when Earth begged for help? When their skies burned? When their orphans wept in bombed-out cities? He looked around the room. Now they offer handshakes because they know the humans could take everything. Down on Earth, the world did not stop to celebrate. It didn't hold parades for the peace offering. They didn't wave banners or sing songs. They just kept rebuilding. Stone by stone, brick by brick, every factory restored. Every hospital opened. Every school rebuilt on old ruins. Not because they wanted to show power, but because they refused to live as victims again, and they taught their children. Everything, the history, the silence, the lies, the betrayal, the lesson, that if the galaxy ever turned its back again, Earth would not wait to be saved. They would save themselves. The response, when it came, was short. A simple audio file recorded by a single woman. Her voice was calm. No anger, no boasting, just clarity. You offered peace now that you fear what we became, but you watched us die. You left us to be burned, broken, and erased, so we will not kneel at your table. There was a pause. Then she said it 2 words. Never. Again, it echoed across every frequency, translated into 100 languages, played by rebels, etched into colony walls, stamped into stolen Dominion gear. Never again would Earth beg for help. Never again would children cry into silence. Never again would humanity wait for mercy that would never come. The galaxy understood now. The humans were not conquerors, but if pushed, they would become judges, and judgment did not need ships or fleets. It only needed memory. Corin stood once more on the Threx observation deck, looking down at the blue planet below. He remembered walking through their ruins, feeling their fire, hearing their laughter in the middle of war, and now the fire had not died. It had simply grown, colder, sharper, controlled, and that was the final stage of fear. Not rage, not retaliation, but calm. Because when humans go calm, it means the storm has already passed, and what's left is decision. Amari turned from the comms console. We've received confirmation, she said. The humans have declined all negotiations. They sent one additional line. Selvax raised an eyebrow. What was it? She looked down at her datapad, as if reading it again would somehow change it. But it didn't. It was burned in now, they said. We will not lead your empire. We will not burn it either. We will be watching. And so Earth stood apart. Not above, not below, but beside the galaxy that had once left it behind. And the galaxy nations. Fleets and empires understood that silence was not surrender. It was strength. Earth had become the quiet shield at the edge of the stars, a name spoken with respect, a name spoken with caution. Because the last time they were forgotten, they rewrote the rules of survival. Some say the humans never built another weapon, that they didn't have to. Some say they'd only smaller, smarter, quieter. Some say Earth began to train not just soldiers, but minds. Teaching empathy like math. Teaching memory like history.
Out.
Teaching every child not how to destroy, but how to never forget. Because that was their true legacy. Not fire, not machines, but memory sharpened into resolve. On the 100th orbit above Earth, Corin recorded his final entry. They were left alone. And they survived. They were pushed. And they struck back. Now, they offer no threats, raise no flags, and demand no loyalty. But they are there, and everyone watches Earth the way you watch the sky before a storm. Not afraid it will roar, but afraid it will remain silent.